writers, how are you going with your Nano?
And Preptober.
You're going to look at character in a slightly different way that you have not seen before, because we are going to look at a character from 20 non-writers on this list, and we can dig a little deeper and develop the characters that we want to tell in our story, because your story needs to be told and you're the only one who can tell it. Time out, little disclaimer. I am dyslexic and I will probably say at least one of these names wrong. Please forgive me. Zoe Saldana. Now, it is remarkable how many movies this woman has been in. She disappears into a role so remarkably that I didn't realize that it was the same person, and I actually had to go back and check to see if she played the same character in the old Avatar that she's playing in the new Avatar, because I was like, really? Oh my goodness, how is she, like, is she come from the same school as Paul Rudd? Like, what's going on? How come she, like, that was like, what, 20 years ago? What? Anyway, what she says, and what I think we all need to think about heading into NaNoWriMo, is that what you start off telling, the story you sign up for, I guess, because as an actor, but as a writer as well, the story you sign up to tell may not be the story you end up telling. As you go through the process of writing it, creating it, things will shift and change, and definitely through the editing process, you'll find new avenue to tell the story. And at the end of the day, at the end, what you have may not be the same thing you started with, and that's okay. Accept it and move on, and I love that. And I want to talk about James Cameron as well, but we're going to get to him first. Let's keep going with some amazing things that actors have said. Brie Larson, whom I love, actor, director, she is amazing. If you haven't seen Unicorn Store, watch it. It is so quirky and I just love it so much. Most people know her as Captain Marvel, but Unicorn Store is definitely worth a watch. I think it's still on Netflix. She starts a story. She is looking for that meaning, that feeling behind it. And as Zoe said, you know, things could change, but maybe even that meaning, that feeling, it changes as it goes. And Brie says that's okay, but if I don't have that feeling, then I don't go into it. If I don't want to tell that story, if I don't care about that theme or that idea, I guess, then I'm not going to do it. And I feel like if you are going to pull yourself through NaNoWriMo, if I'm going to pull myself through NaNoWriMo, we better care about the story. So that theme, that feeling, make sure whatever that is that pulls you through it, it's pulling you through. Another character that is in the Unicorn Store that I love is Samuel L. Jackson's idea of finding that character is taking the ordinary and making it extraordinary. He brings vulnerability and creates authenticity. And that's incredible, because I would not describe Samuel L. Jackson's characters as vulnerable. He's been in so many movies, including having worked with Leonardo DiCaprio, who I remember watching on Growing Pains. I feel like I've grown up with Leonardo DiCaprio. He talks about having the thirst, having that drive. Like Brie talks about going into the story and feeling it. Leonardo DiCaprio talks about when he was very young, he really wanted to be an actor, and he sat down and he watched all those old movies, just sat down and watched them all, because he always thinks, I want to be like that, those great actors from before. I know that I wanted to be a writer, and I'm sure you wanted to be a writer from a very young age. You looked around at other writers and you thought, I could be them. I want to be them. I want to be as good as them. And maybe sometimes you thought I'm better than them, which is really frustrating. I know I've thrown a couple of books because I thought I'm better than this. Still finished the book. The other thing that you need to have is that thirst, that drive to finish it, to look around at the other authors around you, to join a Nano community, either here with me on YouTube or in Patreon or Facebook or wherever you want to go, joining that community and feeding off other people will keep you going. Will keep you going strong for Nano. Another actor I've grown up with is Anne Hathaway. I remember her from Princess Diaries. She really feels like there needs to be a complexity. There needs to be a depth to the character. Tom Hiddleston describes acting or character development as 3D archeology. It's like you're digging deep into those characters and unrooting something, whether it's historical or just a good story. And I think that is what we do as a writer, as writers. I remember studying Michelangelo back in school, that the people that he had were in the stone, and he just had to set them free. And I feel like that is so true of writing. It's better than a movie because it's a million movies, because it plays in your reader's head. Another one that I grew up was Keira Knightly. Remember her from Love Actually, before I was allowed to watch Love Actually, Pirates of the Caribbean, and so on and so forth. She says that when she looks at a character, she wants to do something that scares her, something that keeps her off balance, something that feels like she's right on a knife's edge. She says feelings her feel reckless and keeps her interested, and hopefully keeps the audience interested. And that is definitely how I write. I'm not sure about yourself, but when I write, I always try to push myself. It's why this year I tried to write a funny ghost story. I'm like, I've not seen that. I want to do that. I want to see what happens when I write that. And for Nano, some of you may know, I am going to write a non-romance romance. I want to write something that I haven't seen before, that's a little bit interesting, that I want to read. And it'll keep me engaged because I want to read it and I want to know what happens. And I can't just go to the shelf and pull it off the shelf because it doesn't exist. And your book is the same, right? You need this book, people need this book, and you have to write it because it doesn't exist. Tolkien was the same. There was nothing like Lord of the Rings before Lord of the Rings. There was nothing like it. He had to write that book. And he was in a group of friends along with C.S. Lewis. They had to write the books they wanted to read because they didn't exist. And that is us. We are writing the books that don't exist and the books we want to read. And Keira Knightly is doing that when she creates these characters. She's creating characters that she hasn't seen or that scare her or that intimidate her in some way. And if you're scared, that's good. I take that as a great sign. You're scared? Great. Let's be scared together and let's do this. Ron Howard, he says, it's different as a director. Quotes Billy Wilder here. He says, 80-90% of your work is casting and having a great script. Margaret Atwood said that sometimes you're telling the story from the wrong character. So picking that character, that voice for your Nano is so important. And that's why we're looking at how to develop these characters from a different perspective, because you need to make sure that the character that you are starting with is the right character. Otherwise, you're going to get lost. 90% of your work is done when you know which character you're going through. We saw that with R.L. Stine, that he has his characters all laid out first and he doesn't get writer's block. So we're going to have our character all laid out. We're going to know who is our access into the story. And as Ron Howard quotes Billy Wilder, it's casting and it's script. And once you've cast that role, the other 10% is standing back and staying out of the way as it all works out. For Nano, we're just going to go for it and write and try to stay out of our own way. Imagine we're directors and we're letting our characters and story play out as they always have. Whether you're a pantser or a plotter, if you come in with a great big long outline, that's great. But if you're just going to pants it, that's fine too. But you want to just stay out of the way of the story and not get in your own head and think about it like that. So Martin Scorsese says that it doesn't always happen this way, but it's magic when it does. He described it as inhabiting the role, and I think that as writers, we need to inhabit our characters. Not that we are writing ourselves, but they are coming from a place inside of us where they feel real, that they're authentic, and that we know their posture and their language and the way they speak and the way they interact with the story. And when that happens, it's magic, and you can't force it. But there's so much power in it when it happens, and I think that's something to be thinking about when we're thinking about developing these characters. Steve Martin suggests that you watch people and you observe what's going on. He describes starting out acting and he didn't know how to put down a glass of water or sit down in a chair. He forgot. And it's no, just be a real person. Whether you're writing a fantasy or not, These are real people. Think of them as real people. Helen Mirren says that to make a fantasy feel real, actually it's actually better in a fantasy. She describes a fantasy story as being an empty canvas in order to apply your colors to. And the way she does this is by making sure she has her backstory and the psychology of the character. And she says this may never end up on the screen, and it may never end up on your page, but if it doesn't, you know it, and then you have the freedom to let your characters do what they're going to do because you know who they are. And Natalie Portman has a version of this as well. She's a little more systematic in that she will lay out all the scenes that the character is in and look at them in chronological order. A lot of us don't write chronologically, but lays them all out in chronological order. It's great if you're a plotter, because you can kind of just plot out the scenes and see how your character develops over that time, and see how they progress and change as an individual, how they interact with other relationships and how those relationships work. And this is really important that if the character isn't in a scene, make sure you keep that character from knowing those things. And in my ghost story, I had an entire sequence that happened, my character wasn't there. And because I was telling it from the first person, my audience wasn't there either. So uncovering what happened exactly became almost what kept my audience going. So what happened to that character? On this topic of cementing everything in reality, Ben Stiller says that. And you might think, well, how is Zoolander reality? But even when your characters are that crazy, even when they're that mad, you want to set it in some kind of either backstory or psychology or something that they want. And I think focusing on what they want is a very great, strong purpose there. And that's what Ben Stiller talks about, is that are they jealous in this moment? Are they angry? What do they want out of this moment? And then it gives authenticity to the character. This is one of the ones I'm sure I'm going to say wrong. Saoirse Ronan? Saoirse Ronan? Love her to bits. Obviously, she played Jo, and that's my namesake, so it's hard not to love someone who plays Jo. But she often talks about making sure that the character has a backbone. A background of some kind of history to them. So you can write a girl next door, but she'd like to play a girl next door that is not surfacey, that is unexpected. There's something else going on below the surface. And so whatever your character's going in, think about that. Andrew Garfield treats them like they're real life characters. If you're not thinking about them as if they're real, then your audience is going to have trouble sustaining that disbelief. Allow yourself to go on a journey. Tom Hanks talks about this, is every time he plays a character, every time I write a book, I'm sure you feel the same. I've gone on a journey as well. Tom Hanks says he goes on a journey as well. He learns something about himself, about emotions. He always ends up somewhere different than where he started. Olivia Coleman says this as well. It gives her the freedom to behave badly, to behave in ways that you wouldn't normally behave in society, to feel things that you wouldn't normally express, probably especially as a British citizen. That you aren't allowed to show these emotions in real life. This is where you can just go free on the page. Dig deep where those things that you weren't feeling, that you weren't letting yourself feel them on the page, because that's going to feel true to your reader. Just like Samuel L. Jackson talks about the ordinary to the extraordinary, Angela Bassett talks about this as well, and you can see that in her work for sure. This idea of anyone can be extraordinary, and anyone can go forward and be that teacher, seeing stories as teachers, seeing stories as opening up conversations that we should be having or we need to be having, because that's what's really great about story. That's what I love about story, is not necessarily telling people what to think, but giving them the opportunity to think and question the way things are and how they can make it better. And if someone reads something I wrote and goes, you know what, I never thought of it that way, I'm going to think about that some more, that would be just amazing. Or even better, I feel seen. James Cameron says when it comes to character, it needs to be somebody that you want to go on the journey with. It needs to be somebody that you can relate to. And so tying into universal themes and universal ideas and getting to those really quickly and very quickly identifying what it is about this character, what they want, and how what they want is going to push them into this very specific story, and how that either is going to reveal more about them and raise the stakes, and maybe even ultimately get them what they want, or as Neil Gaiman puts it, get them what they need. Because sometimes you don't get what you want in a story. But as the Rolling Stone says, if you try, you get what you need. Today in our prep, let us write a compelling sketch about our character. Let's develop them. Doesn't have to be long, but needs to be compelling. Maybe it's the introduction, and you can do that in such a way that is syncodoshi, if I'm saying that correctly. Part made to represent the whole. Or just an outline of them, like R.L. Stine does. Just tell yourself in 5 sentences who this character is, what they want, where they're going, the general feelings of them, why we want to follow them through the story. And if you can do that, you'll be well on your way for NaNoWriMo. And if you still want to dig deeper into character, you can check out this playlist here.